Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Zelda II, The Adventure of Link. This is one of the very few Zelda games that I had never played before. It originally came out for the NES, I played it on the Game & Watch, and therefore I must apologize for the really crappy footage that I captured on my phone. Recording another screen never looks good, but I tried my best, okay? As far as the plot goes, we have to reference the manual just like we did for the first Legend of Zelda. It takes place with the same Link, and there aren't a ton of Legend of Zelda games that have the same Link from previous versions. There are only a couple that I can think of off the top of my head, like the Ocarina of Time Link was in Majora's Mask, and I think that the Wind Waker Link was in Phantom Hourglass, but this is a reoccurring Link from the original Legend of Zelda. In the story, the King of Hyrule, I guess, passes away, and he imparts the knowledge about the location of the Triforce of Courage to Zelda, but not Zelda's brother, and so Zelda's brother has a wizard try and get the information out of her, and the wizard ends up putting her under a spell, so she falls asleep and can't wake up, very much like Sleeping Beauty, and then the wizard dies, apparently. That's the only plot that I really gathered up, just from a quick little Google search at least. So now Link needs to find the Triforce of Courage, which is hidden away, and only Zelda knows where it is, but she is asleep, and we need to find it to wake her up. Now, first and foremost, this game has a really bad reputation of being the toughest, most difficult, most frustrating, worst Legend of Zelda game that has come out to date as far as like on a main Nintendo system. Now, there are some CDI Zelda games that are pretty bad from what I understand, but I've never played those. We're not talking about those right now. This game just has a really tarnished reputation. And I was kind of going into this with the attitude of like, oh, maybe it's just misunderstood, maybe just because it's not like the other Zelda games that it actually is good, but it just doesn't match up to other people's expectations of what they think of when they think of like a Legend of Zelda game. I just want to say that I absolutely recommend following a walkthrough or a guide of some kind when you're playing this game, because I think this game is absolutely impossible to play without one. I would say without any external knowledge whatsoever, it is impossible to beat this game. Now, I know there's going to be like one guy who opts in the comments and says like, I beat this when I was 7 years old in the course of a weekend because I rented it from Blockbuster or something like that, and I have no choice but to believe you. But as far as my own personal experience, this is like impossible, because there are a lot of really esoteric things about this game that you would have no idea what to do without looking up some sort of guide. Like just off the top of my head, there are like invisible enemies unless you get like a certain item that is hidden. There's hidden walls that you have to like just straight up jump into the wall in order to get key items. Another key item that you have to get is like you have to go to a random house in a village and like duck right underneath a random table and use the like interaction button, and then you get like a key item that way. Even just in the overworld, there are really hidden key item, key location stuff that you have to press a certain button in order to like reveal them. It's so random and just no guidance whatsoever within the game. Now, I haven't taken a really in-depth look at the manual, but I don't think the manual is that in-depth either in terms of where to go and what to do. It might just be cryptic hints about what to do. So all that to say that I followed a walkthrough completely. I couldn't go 10 minutes without referencing a walkthrough of some kind. Now, aside from all this random, difficult, mysterious stuff that you have to do in order to play through the whole entire game, this game is kind of the black sheep of the Zelda family in another way, in it being a 2D side-scrolling game. Now, when you are in the overworld, it might be a layout that you are more familiar with other 2D Zelda games, where it is a top-down perspective. But when you go into towns, or when you initiate like this combat sequence, you enter in this side-scrolling view, and this isn't the first time that you see it in this perspective. The original Legend of Zelda actually had a few couple rooms that had this 2D side side-scrolling perspective, but it wasn't the whole game. It was maybe like 5% of the game that you played with this perspective. In this game, you're playing a good 80% of the game with this perspective. And the combat is actually pretty unique, and I felt like if done in a different way, it would actually be really engaging. And that's why I think that this game is prime for a remake. I think it could be a really good game with just some polish and some better initiated ideas. You have an attack when you're standing and an attack when you're ducking, and you also block projectiles by standing or ducking, but you're only blocking one of the two tiles that Link is occupying. So if an enemy is shooting these projectiles at you, you have to make sure that you're blocking with your shield at the corresponding height, otherwise you will get damaged. So there is some technical combat here, and I think that it could have been good, but it really just ends up being very frustrating. This is also the first appearance, I believe, of the downward strike that Link is so famous for, where he just plunges his sword straight down at the enemy. And if you are skilled enough, you can kind of do this little pogo jump on top of enemy, Shovel Knight style, but you don't get nearly the amount of height that Shovel Knight would when he's pogo sticking on a shovel. So it's actually a lot more difficult to pull off in this game. This game also has RPG mechanics, which not a lot of Zelda games do. The closest one that I can think of is Breath of the Wild, where you unlock extra hearts. But in this game, you actually have experience points. So every time you defeat an enemy, you accrue a certain amount of experience, and when you hit a certain threshold, you can level up one of your skills, that being your attack damage, your health, or your magic. And that's really cool. I think that it is interesting that a Zelda game actually has these RPG leveling up mechanics like this. It actually gives you incentive to kill all of the random enemies in the world, and they did this instead of rupees, however, so you don't need to save up a currency of any kind in order to purchase better weapons or potions. You just worry about leveling up. And that brings me to another gripe about this game, and that being game over. So this game is the first one that introduced the live system. So you have 3 lives until you get a game over. If you get a game over, it sends you way back to the beginning of the game. However, certain progress is saved, so don't be too stressed out about that. For instance, key items that you gather up or your levels are still saved when you get teleported back to the starting point, but your experience points don't. So there is nothing more devastating than being knee-deep in a Zelda dungeon, and you are just in the thick of it, and you're at the final boss, and you have maybe like 3,900 experience points, and you need 4,000 experience points to level up, and then you die and get a game over. Guess what? You're getting zipped way back to the beginning, and your experience point counter turns to 0. And this experience point threshold gets higher and higher as you level up more and more. So you're going to have to do a lot of grinding if you want to max out all of your stats, which is actually pretty necessary because this game is so difficult, especially if you are playing on a system that does not allow save points and it does not allow rewinding. If you are playing on a virtual console, definitely utilize these features because this game is so brutal, especially near the end of the game. If you fall off a ledge, that is an instant life lost. If you finally make it to the next palace, the next dungeon, and you only have 1 life left, you might as well just cut your losses, go ahead and kill yourself, start back at the beginning, and start with 3 lives, because there's no way you're going to be making it throughout that whole dungeon with just 1 life. Some enemies can even steal your XP when they hit you, which is even more frustrating. Now, some of the friendlier citizens in these towns that you can visit give you a little bit of a saving grace, where if you visit a town, you can talk to certain characters, they will lead you into their house, which doesn't sound creepy at all, and they can heal up your health and your mana. There are a couple times where you need to talk to key characters and they will give you new spells, and spells are actually one of the more exciting things about this game. There are some pretty cool spells here, and you definitely need to utilize them if you want to beat this game the way that it is intended, because there is a shield spell which reduces the amount of damage you take, there's a jump spell, and some of the ledges that you have to leap over are nearly impossible without the jump spell. One of my favorite spells in this game, however, is the fairy fairy spell that straight up just turns you into a fairy and you could just fly around the room. It is pretty frustrating though when you need to destroy a block or an obstacle in your way, and you can't because you're in a fairy, so you have to backtrack and leave the room in order to return back to your Link form. But this is another key thing that you need to think of when you are playing through this game, is managing your mana correctly, because some spells are absolutely necessary in order to progress, and if you don't have enough mana, there's no way to stockpile on potions or anything like that, so you're just going to need to backtrack and just defeat random enemies or walk all the way back to town in order to refill that mana pool. Now, I forgot to bring this up just a second ago regarding lives, but I just thought of it. In the game, there are certain resources scattered across the world called Link Dolls, and these Link Dolls basically act as an extra life, which is all well and good because I need as many lives as possible because I don't want to get a game over and start all the way over. The really crappy thing about these Link Dolls, however, is they only appear once. Even if you get a game over and return to the same spot, those Link Dolls are gone. So once you gather them up, make sure that you don't lose them too quickly because there's no way to retrieve them, and there are only 5 or 6 Link Dolls in the whole entire game, according to the walkthrough that I was following at least. And like I said, you're going to be burning through a ton of these lives because the combat is so difficult. The enemies they do have a pattern of some kind, but their movement is so sporadic and random, and Link's reach with his sword is so short. You need to be like right up close and personal to these bad guys in order to do any damage to them. But if they just move over one single tile closer to you, you are going to get hit by them. And you don't really have much in terms of ranged attacks. In the first game, when you are full health, Link's Master Sword will shoot a projectile and hit enemies. And in this game, it shoots forward maybe like 3 or 4 tile spaces before it diminishes. But most of the end game enemies don't get damaged by this projectile at all. Now, there is a spell that adds a flame projectile to your sword, which is very beneficial. But for certain characters, especially like the bosses, the flame isn't going to do that much. It is pretty cool exploring a Legend of Zelda side-scrolling dungeon like this. It utilizes elevators. It very much reminds me of like playing through a Metroid game, which is cool in a Zelda universe. However, it doesn't feel like Zelda dungeons in terms that you are often used to, especially like the extra key items that you can uncover. This was actually pretty similar to the original Legend of Zelda as well, where most of the items that you get aren't that beneficial in terms of combat or even platforming. Most of the time it's like, okay, now that you have this item, you can get to the next dungeon. So nothing really exciting, like let's say like a raft. If you get the raft, it just means that you can go to the other side of the continent. Or if you get the boots, supposedly the boots let you walk on water and fire, but that isn't during the 2D side-scrolling times. It is just to walk across water in the overworld to get to the next dungeon. Look, overall, I know there are defenders for this game, and I know this is at least a couple of people's favorite Legend of Zelda game, and like I said, I was going into this with the mindset that this is just a misunderstood Zelda game, and I was going to come out on the other side of it as a real defender, maybe a real hipster, you know, like I push up my glasses and say, well, you just don't understand Zelda 2. But I have to agree with the majority here. I think this is a bad game, and there's just too much nonsense to it. Like, if you can't play through a game without a guide at all, that's kind of like a key sign that you know that it is a bad game. There's just too much nonsense in this game for me to get behind it. Although I really, really wish that I was able to. And I'm actually pretty glad that I finally finished playing through this game and rolled the credits, because it was a very frustrating experience, especially the late game. Maybe I'm just bad, maybe I just need to get good, but I just did not like this game. And if it wasn't tied to the Zelda series, I think this game would have been lost to the sands of time a long, long time ago. That's why I think I'm going to have to give this Zelda game a 1 out of 5. As much as that pains me to say, I just think that this game is bad. But I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear the defenders tell me why I'm such a noob and why I'm bad at this game and why I just don't understand Zelda 2. I want to hear from you guys. Also, let me know if you have any questions or comments about Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!